Thank you all for being with us this morning. We have an exciting speaker, and I'd like to now introduce longtime Leadership 100 member Helen Nicozisis to introduce this morning's speaker.
Your Eminence, Metropolitans, Your Graces, dear clergy, and all sisters and brothers in Christ. Good morning, everyone. What an incredible honor it is for me to introduce our next speaker. When Lou and I brought a 7-pound, 3-ounce baby boy home, he looked at us with these big brown eyes. He didn't sleep for the first 7 months of his life, keeping his eyes open for 20 hours of each day. Our first child was named after Lou's mother, Evgenia. Philip, our second child, got to be named after my side of the family, my dad and my late brother. I know now that he was trying to tell us with those big brown eyes that he didn't want to miss anything in this big, beautiful world that God had created. He wanted to explore all that God would unfold in his life. Philip is a graduate of George Washington University in DC with a political science degree, and he has an MBA in real estate development from American University. While in Washington, he served as an intern for the late George Gekas, congressman from Pennsylvania, and he also served as the first paid intern for the American Hellenic Institute, headquartered in DC, and I saw Nick Larangakis here yesterday, who is the executive director. For sure, he has traversed this globe, and his talents have been used to help so many people in many ways. He will share his book with you today, but he may leave out things that I want to share with you. He was overtaken with compassion for the unwed mothers at the Wildflower Home in Thailand, where he underwrote an entire hydroponic garden field for them to raise vegetables and sprouts to feed their children and to make some income so that they could help their children. Philip did manual labor there for 2 days as he traveled on this year-long journey. Part of the proceeds of his book will be assisting these women forever. He may not tell you about the global network of friends and colleagues that he has because of his vegan activism and his lectures across the globe that have changed the lives of many and improved the health and well-being of those with grave illnesses. But I must mention this because we are so proud of him. In our family, we call him our Renaissance man. Mother is coming out of me. For he is into so many pursuits and with so much passion in each one of them. And he uses his talents to make sure that his service does matter, to use a phrase that Tim used yesterday. Philip is also into fitness and does hot yoga, Pilates, just to name a few, included in his daily routine. He loves his music, and he's into songwriting. His instrumentals via Universal Records are featured in television, movies, and radio. He is a PADI diver master and a member of the Professional Association of Master Divers. And he has completed over 700 dives in 19 countries, from the Great Barrier Reef in Australia to his most recent dive off the coast of Cuba. I've grown accustomed to seeing the videos that Philip sends me of him swimming among the sharks and these other strange creatures from the deep. Community activities have had Philip involved since he was 7 years old, when he marched for CROP to fight world hunger through the Annunciation Orthodox Church in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. While he was in college, he organized rock bands for a whole weekend, I think 15 bands, and he raised approximately $5,000 in 1985 to feed the hungry in DC with Miriam's Soup Kitchen. Most recently, he has supported activities for autistic adults in the Palm Beach area He offers scholarships for those who would like to attend the Hippocrates Health Institute in West Palm Beach, from which he graduated as a credentialed health educator, and many other Palm Beach charities, and he is a supporter of the OCMC. To use another one of Tim's phrases, he is paying it forward. He has been a member of Leadership 100 on his own since 1995, and one of the first 12 who signed up for the Young Professional category of Leadership 100 when Lou and I co-chaired the annual Leadership 100 conference in Boca Raton, Florida. So, with great joy and much parental love, I introduce our son, Philip. I got two more sentences. Who has a heart like a rose, always blooming, caring, and giving, so he can share his book, which was a #1 bestseller in 7 countries in 2019, about his living in 12 cities in 12 months on 4 continents. Thank you.
Stole my thunder. Wow, what a buildup. Is that really about me? I can tell you, though, everyone knows Lou and Helen Nikozis. How many people know Lou and Helen, my parents? Yes. How many of you never raise your hands no matter what? Raise your hands. Raise your hands. Okay. Actually, it should come as no surprise, therefore, that I dedicated my book to my parents. And in the dedication page, which is right here, I said, this book is dedicated to my parents. Thank you, Mom and Dad, for believing in me, ... most of the time. And I conclude, Dad, I'm so lucky that you were born before me. They say that writing a book is the hardest thing and the closest that a man will come to childbirth. And having written and pored over these 300 pages, word by word, all kinds of decisions that had to be made at the publishing stage, even after you write the book, I have to believe that's true. Not only the 300 pages that I wrote in the physical book, but also in the audiobooks. I read the audiobook in my own voice for 9 hours. And it took many more hours after that to produce it to where it is now on Audible. But being a vegan that I am, you know how you know if someone's a vegan, right? Don't worry, they'll tell you. Being a vegan, I don't believe in causing unnecessary pain and suffering on sentient beings. So instead of 9 hours, we're going to spend the next 45 minutes or so. What I want to do this morning, I want to take you on a trip around the world. A modern-day odyssey by a guy named Phil Nikozis, not Odysseus, but it's a modern-day odyssey where I lived in 12 cities in 12 months, in 10 countries, on 4 continents, with 48 other people who were strangers on day one, and them, like me, ran their businesses and held their jobs from their smartphone and their laptop. Welcome to Have Laptop, Will Travel, 12 cities, 12 months, memoirs of a digital nomad. They say that travel is the only thing you buy that makes you richer. For me, it's even one more than that. I'm in love with cities I haven't even been to yet. I'm in love with people, I'm in love with friends that I haven't even met yet. As it turns out, I'm not the only one. And I think actually that's why my book has had some commercial success with little or no marketing. As a matter of fact, my memoir has been #1 in 7 countries, #1 in several categories, including #1 in sales in the business travel category. Thank you. Thank you. Turns out travel is the #1 aspiration for most people. We have to understand, though, that this is the idea that most people can even travel at all is a relatively new phenomenon. Back in the day, I love that phrase, back in the day. Could mean like 5 years ago, could mean 300 years ago. So let's say a couple hundred years ago, you had to be rich enough, in order to travel, you had to be rich enough to own a horse. Or you had to be able to rent the horse. And you'd only be able to travel in the daytime because it was dangerous to travel otherwise. And you could only travel short distances. So this travel thing was only reserved to the people, the men of leisure, the aristocratic class. And so the aristocrat from say, the United Kingdom would maybe go to a few of the key cities in Europe like Prague and Paris. And that man of leisure was able to travel, while the rest of us, if we didn't exercise, we would starve. It was called farming. It was called farming. So now, in the here and the now, what I want to understand, spend a little time before we get into the main ideas and tell some of the main stories in the book, is that we are living in the age of abundance. I call this the most important graph in the world. You see, I tend to, sometimes I exaggerate, because when you tell stories, you never want to let the truth get in the way of a good story sometimes. But this one is actually the truth. What it shows there is the gross domestic product of people of the world individually, each person, the GDP income of each person since BC, beginning of Christ, and even before that, all the way up until about a couple hundred years ago. Guess what? The income of average people was zero. Just about zero. Understand that the natural state of mankind is privation. The natural state of mankind is extreme poverty. So understand that my ability to travel and our ability to travel is really my ability to live in 12 cities, 12 months, and run my business from my smartphone and laptop is really on the platform of this idea, this age that we're born into, this situation right now, the age of abundance. It's so incredible, this world we live in right now, that average everyday people have other people drive them around like chauffeurs. It's called Uber. It's so amazing that right now we live in an age where average everyday people have other people cook for us. It's called a restaurant. Up until the 70s, only 15% of Americans had ever even been on an airplane. So let's talk about, I'm going to give a basic breakdown of the book, and then we're going to go through some of the chapters and talk about, share some of the stories, some of the main ideas. I lived in 12 cities, 12 months, 4 continents, and so therefore each chapter is the city that I lived in. And I turned what the expression is called digital nomad. And I ran my business from my smartphone and laptop, and that business is a family office. That's the new buzz phrase now. When I first heard family office, those two words put together, family and office, scared the daylights out of me. But it actually has worked very well for 25 years. Myself and members of my family, we own and manage a property portfolio. Before that, we were in the carpet business. And I didn't do it alone. I joined a band of intrepid travelers, 48 other peoples who were strangers on day one for a year of life-changing experiences. And I did it with a company called Remote Year. And what Remote Year does is they organize these teams of people, these location-independent professionals. So if I had to sum up what it's like to travel with 48 people who you didn't know in the beginning, who you get to know really, really well as the months go on. And I had roommates for the first time since college. And so to sum it all up, I could tell you what it was like. It's as I say here on the screen, a bizarre social experiment. And so the traveling family, as we called ourselves, we then nicknamed ourselves the Tramily. And I would suggest to you, and maybe you've experienced this yourself, when you live in a city for a month at a time, you actually begin to feel like a resident and not a tourist. And last but not least, I use the platform of many places that I lived around the world to share the vegan message with formal presentations, somewhat like I'm doing now, and I hope perhaps next year that Leadership 100 would have me back to talk about the benefits of a plant-based diet and the benefits of a plant-based lifestyle. So we had some success sharing the vegan message. And I guess in the last, not just in Remote Year, but in the last 2 years or so, I've been to 16 countries sharing the vegan message, telling people that it's not just about our physical health. It's really not about us, but also our mental health is affected, our spiritual health is affected, Our societal health, the very institution of war, actually was started over the fight over animals. The oldest word for war in Sanskrit is goyam, means the desire for more cows. And last but not least, our environmental health is also affected. My story for my memoir starts, this is a picture from the balcony of my waterfront apartment just over the bridge here in West Palm Beach, Florida, where I've lived for several years. And so that view is the moon that I took. The moon is shining over the body of water. And I didn't know it at that time, but I learned that there's a name for this. The road-like reflection that the moon makes off a body of water is a Swedish word for, the Swedish word is mangata. And it was a bit of foreshadowing, because when I joined Remote Year and I joined the 48 others who we traveled with in the Tramily, Remote Year gave us a name, and our team was called Mangata. That picture actually is at the John Lennon Wall in Prague, Czech Republic. So where, pray tell, did Remote Year take us? The itinerary was etched in stone. We started out in Split, Croatia. Then we went to Prague, Czech Republic. Then Lisbon, Portugal. Then we went to Asia, Kyoto, Japan, Chiang Mai, Thailand, Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and then 6 months in South America and North America, Buenos Aires, Argentina, Cordoba, Argentina, Lima, Peru, Medellin and Bogota, Colombia, and finally we adjourned in Ciudad de Mexico, Mexico City. First stop, Split, Croatia. It's a beautiful coastal town, Split, Croatia, on the Adriatic, just across from Italy. It's a former communist country. You see where I have the circle there is where our apartment was, but also our work share space. In every city that we had, Remote Year organized these co-working spaces where we can go and do our work. And Split, Croatia was a great place for me and the others to figure out, especially for me, never having done this before, to figure out if this thing about working away from work would work. And so my secretary, right here in West Palm Beach, downtown Clematis Street, she would gather breeze blocks of paperwork and overnight them through DHL to wherever I was around the world. And I would open up this big package, and I would break down the paperwork, and whatever I couldn't handle electronically via email or Eddie, or in the paperwork, sign it, scan it, or maybe send some checks, whatever I couldn't handle electronically, I would take that paperwork and send a breeze block of paperwork back to her here in West Palm Beach, and it actually was working. So wherever I was, this sending of the paperwork back and forth, whatever I couldn't handle electronically, was working. So the thing that I think you'll get the hang of when you read my book is I always looked for the deeper meaning of things. But I think you'll also get the feeling that the deeper meaning of things found me as the chapters and the months go on. And specifically here in Split, Croatia, you'll see at the upper right, that's Diocletian's castle. And Diocletian's castle was a place where, and he was a terrible, terrible dictator who, as you probably know, murdered a lot of Christians. But now, today, Diocletian's castle is the #1 tourist attraction that has been converted to bars, restaurants, nightclubs, hotels, souvenir shops, and apartments. And I thought to myself, and I write about it, that this really does signify to me an improvement. Remember we talked about we're living in the age of abundance, and we don't realize it because we like to complain a lot. No matter where we are on the economic scale, I think we're still born to complain as the human condition for some reason. But I noted that I thought this really signified an improvement in the human condition, that here we are partying in a former emperor's crib instead of having it be a place where brutality and dictatorial brutality, perhaps, was sent messages from that house, that former house of the emperor. And now we're co-working spaces around the world. So wherever we went, we stayed in place. We would have our office in places like WeWork, and it was you'd always go and you'd have your Wi-Fi, and I always felt like even no matter what the time change, if I was in Asia, we're 12 hours ahead. And I would always call up people in a business context, and I'd say, hello from the future. And wherever I was, I always wanted to go to the office. In Thailand, when my Eagles were in the Super Bowl for the first time, or won it for the first time, And I was there at a sports bar in Thailand at 6:30 a.m. Monday morning, and I called my friends and I texted my friends. I said, "Don't worry, we got this. Hello from the future. I'm here from the future, and the Eagles are going to win." Chapter 2, Czech Republic. I think one thing that turned out really nicely about my book is that in each chapter, as you can see, the beginning page lists the city that I'm going to be living in for the month, but also see the map there, so you know where you are in the world. And then it also has a quote. And this quote, I thought, and the quote for each chapter attempts to set the tone for the chapter itself. And so when talking about Prague, we say, people who prefer ebooks think that books merely take up space. But then, so your children also, they take up space. The Sistine Chapel takes up space. And the city of Prague, it takes up space too. And what we mean by that is it's absolutely resplendently beautiful. Resplendently beautiful. It's got that medieval, old world European Baroque charm. As a matter of fact, it's one of the only cities that wasn't bombed during major cities that wasn't bombed during World War II. And in the 18 and 1900s, when the other major European cities were knocking down buildings and gentrifying, they did not gentrify in that way. And so that was, we're just starting to get into the groove. We got almost a whole year ahead of us. And out of nowhere, we get the call from the United States Embassy. And we were, the three of us, two of my remote year colleagues and myself, were invited to a panel on American entrepreneurism. And we went into the U.S. Embassy, and we were called into the green room, the little private area, which made me wonder once again, why is the green room never green? It was not green. And she called us together privately. She says, "I want you to know that the Czech people, because of communism, because of culture, whatever reason, that they are used to hearing the word no when it comes to business. They're not used to sticking their neck out. They don't like taking risks." And so our topic was sustaining and overcoming difficulties in business. And so we all got up there and at the panel, and we told our story. And it was just such a thrill to be able to represent my country. And I won't go through everything that I said, but the thing that I added that no one else did was that as someone who is the son of a war refugee, and also raised by grandparents who lived with us in the house as well, I feel like everything that we do, and I think everyone here in this room would agree, that we're standing on the shoulders of giants, that everything we do is really because of the success of the pioneers who came before us. How about that? It's a post-communist country on the way up. It's about only 30 years young that they switched over. And we were there during the anniversary of the Velvet Revolution. And we had a walking tour in this area here where the castle is. And Marcus, our tour guide, said that it's called the Velvet Revolution because basically the overthrow of communism happened without firing a shot. And so he said that on a Friday afternoon that the students decided to have a rally, a protest rally in the square. And since it was a Friday afternoon, they were going home to mom for the weekend, and they brought their laundry. And so, however, there was at the square a melee, and the police started beating them with billy clubs because they got trapped. And so then the laundry got strewn all over the place, and it looked like a massacre had occurred because of the laundry and the people running everywhere. And so you could say, and then soon after that, those pictures were taken and sent around the world. And because of the way it looked as if a massacre had occurred, the communists actually stepped down soon after that. So you could actually say that dirty laundry defeated communism in the Czech Republic. One other thing about my book is that, and I've had some comments, people who've already been looking through the book, is there's segues, little boxes that take you out of the story, and they include no filter, fill facts, and fill feelings. And I have a no filter, but it's a little off color that I don't want to say here. But here's a no filter is in Kuala Lumpur. Our elevator was always breaking in our apartment building, and I noticed, I pointed out in my no filter that would never happen in Japan because everything's always done perfectly and always working just perfectly in Japan. Have laptop, will travel. We're on to Lisbon, Portugal. Massive gentrification underway with the influx of expatriates. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful city. They call it the Lisbon Light. And it's, I compare it to the San Diego light, that certain sparkle, that certain light, especially in the afternoon, that just makes everything buoyant. And it made me wonder, why did Magellan and Columbus ever leave Lisbon, Portugal? It's so beautiful. City hills, ancient fortifications, Baroque churches, former factories turned art spaces. And so just as I learned my way around the city, this happened every time. Just as you learn your way, you start feeling like a resident. You know where your favorite restaurants are, you know how to get there, you know where your grocery stores are, you know your way to the workspace, which sometimes could be like a 20-minute walk. And just as you get to know a place, it's time to move on and learn and try to learn a new city, new Wi-Fi codes, new places to go, new people to meet. And so now we are done with Europe, and now we're going to spend 3 months in Asia. And the first stop was Kyoto, Japan. And for the first time, I discovered a culture that was almost perfect. Basically, honor, respect, punctuality, perfection. Everything was done on time, perfectly, with no drama, and also non-confrontation is a big thing for them. And so, and it was, as you can see, I'm wearing, I guess what's been more popular now, unfortunately, with this virus that's going around, the surgical mask. And everybody wore it, so I just felt like, I'm just going to be like one of them and wear the surgical mask. And we're also in the dead of winter at this time. And I became obsessed with this. I just could never get over it. You see the bikes, right? So on the left side are the bikes at my apartment building. In the middle are the bikes in a department store. And on the right are the bikes leaning up against the 7-Eleven. And in Asia, you're pretty much in a 7-Eleven store every day for say, a surgical mask or garbage bags. In Japan, they've got 4 different colors of garbage bags because you have to sort. They're very serious about their garbage and their recycling. So the thing that you'll see there in the pictures, maybe you could already figure it out. There's no locks on the bikes. Imagine a society where nothing ever got stolen. That's Japan. And at the bottom, you see the change left in the bowl there. And it's not a tipping society. And so at least twice, I left a few yen. A yen is 1/10 of a penny. So for example, I leave 3/10 of a penny in the bowl. 2 times they ran out to the street in the cold to chase me down to give me back 3/10 of a penny. Because it would be dishonorable. They would be taking, in their mind, they would be taking advantage of the situation. The nice thing about traveling and experiencing other cultures is this thing called what we call acculturalization. So bring it home. So in Asia, and especially in Japan, did you know that you take off your shoes certainly when you enter your home? And in most restaurants, you take off your shoes when you go out to eat. Or if you go to an office of some kind, you take off your shoes and they give you the slippers. So here I had those nice light blue slippers there. But the thing that they take it to the next level. When you go to the restroom in these places, you take off the slippers they gave you and you put on the slippers for the restroom. And so I say bring it home because now here I am in West Palm Beach. I have my slippers that I wear in the house, and then I have look at all those shoes. And those are just the ones, Imelda Marcos, if you're old enough to remember Imelda Marcos, she would be very proud of my shoe collection. My non-leather shoe collection, by the way. Now we're moving on to Thailand. Chiang Mai, Thailand in the north. Thailand is called the land of smiles. It wasn't as orderly as Japan. They're a little more loosey-goosey. They smiled more. It was also a little more chaotic. It's also a Buddhist country, and it's a law and order monarchy. And in this picture, I'm at a grocery store, which actually I thought it was the wrong place. I walked in, and it was actually a superstore with religious artifacts for Buddhism, for statues, DVDs, CDs, calendars, those kind of things. And I thought I was in the wrong place, but I kept walking, and then after those items was the grocery store. And guess what? The grocery store was assumed vegan. And wherever I went in Europe, I could go to a restaurant, not have to look at a menu. I would just say, please, can I have the Buddhist meal? And I thought, well, isn't that interesting that a religion identifies so strongly with the ideas of nonviolence and compassion and respect for all life? And you know what, though? As far as I'm concerned, my Christianity is in alignment with those principles as well. This was interesting for me, hard to accept. It's a law and order monarchy, which means even more so, they disbanded they dissolved the parliament a few years back. They have a strong king system. Everything revolves around the king, and then the military enforces the rules. But it works. And so I'm a political science major, and I was not only political science major, but growing up Greek American, where we invented democracy, we thought that that was the best and only way to have happiness in a society. Well, here was a society that worked very, very well, and in some cases better, with nothing like that, with basically a monarchy system. So it got me thinking that who needs the messy democracies of the West with the stakeholder input when you've got thousands of years of cultural capital helping and telling the people how to live their life the best? So my mom had mentioned the Wildflower Home. This is a picture. This is the Wildflower Home. It's a shelter for young mothers. And the way that they wind up there is because they get kicked out of the village, not because they're unwed and it's embarrassing, but it's actually superstitious reasons. The village heads believe that it would bring unlucky situation, maybe have a bad harvest. So they get kicked out and they go to the Wildflower Home. And so I noticed that they were cooking some of their food, and I said, well, they were cooking the mung beans. And at Hippocrates Health Institute, which is just 11 miles away from here, they tell us that you shouldn't cook the food. Now, I'm a vegan, not a saint, so I do eat some cooked food. And but without exception, though, when you cook the food, you kill the nutrition. And also understand that we are the only life form out of 8 million life forms that cooks their food. It's just kind of strange, but we do it. And so without getting into the technicals, I kept telling them, well, at first I went and I got some sprouting equipment in Old City, the labyrinth of the Old City, within the Old City walls. You can imagine all this, very chaotic and a lot of old buildings. I found sprouting equipment. I found mung beans. I found almonds. I found lentils. And we did some sprouting on one day. Then the next day we came back and we ate the food. And I kept telling them, instead of getting into the technicals like I can, like sprouts are baby trees. They have all the intelligence of the tree. They're 30 to 40, 50 times more nutritious than a whole food plant, a regular whole food vegetable, because they're little seeds and they have a lot of power in them. So instead of getting into all of that, instead of talking about hormones, oxygen, phytonutrients, and enzymes in the sprouts, I just said, high nutrition, low cost for the children. High nutrition, low cost for the children. A few moments went by and I said, high nutrition, low cost for the children. And so then we left Thailand and a couple weeks went by, and I guess it stuck. It's a Catholic organization, and the head nun, I think, picked up on the idea that it was definitely cheap and that they could have nutritious food for the children. And so I got an instant message from one of the staff there showing a picture of the sprouts, and you can see I replied there, I'm so happy about this, you have no idea. So as a businessman, I built shopping centers and Walmarts and Lowe's Home Improvement and some other things, and you could call those accomplishments. But this and some other give-backs, paying it forward, as they say, was it has to be one of the biggest accomplishments of my life. Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Look at that skyline. Incredible, incredible skyline, an incredible metropolis. Went from 1 million to 10 million in just a few decades. You can see I'm there at the Petronas Towers. It's a 70% Muslim country. And I have to say I had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder about that because since 9/11 I've been a student of the life of Muhammad and a student of the history of Islam. And I was a little bit on guard, but it seems to, if you ask me, Malaysia is the model. If you want to be a Muslim country, then look at Malaysia, and that's how we would do it. So I also participated, I didn't know it when I was going into it, but a memorable lunch. A memorable lunch with Mr. X. But I first had dinner or lunch with my two friends that I met there, some vegan activists. They're actually Indian people, born and raised in Malaysia. The minorities in Malaysia are the Chinese and the Indians. And we went to Little India, pictured there. And we went to a restaurant called a donation restaurant. I never heard of a restaurant where you paid what you wanted. You paid whatever you wanted. So he said, I usually pay 4 ringgits, which is about $1.25. And so we sat down with our meal, and then I saw Dave's face. His face dropped, and I thought maybe a cockroach landed in his curry. And he said, don't say anything, but there's a man coming. And this Mr. X actually has a real name. He's so dangerous that people who knew that I was writing this book suggested that I take his name out and we just call him Mr. X. He had a bizarre comb over. He was in his 80s, and he had very dark Aboriginal skin, but he had the face of an Englishman. He was a classic Indian-looking man. And so he was the center of a $100 million corruption scheme. $100 million corruption scheme, and he absconded with lots and lots of money, and he was on trial. But during the trial, people kept disappearing. They kept getting murdered. And so he came over to say hello to us. He wanted to know how he knew Dave. He said, I don't know you, sir. I'm just a law student. He says, I know you somehow. So he couldn't place how he knew him. He walked away. Dave told me, he says, my sister was one of the lead prosecutors in the trial. And so he was able to get off. And then he was able to go, he went into exile into India. They came back. He was able to buy his immunity. So now he's walking around as a free man. And so here's the thing about travel and what I feel like I experience is that an ounce of experience is worth more than a ton of theories. You know, I've been in this room many times wearing a tuxedo and you stroke a check to be here for a charity, and you give some air kisses, and everybody feels great about what they're doing, just like right now. And that's great, because organizations need money. But there was nothing like giving the Sprout Workshop to those young mothers in Thailand. There's nothing like hearing about corruption. You hear about corruption in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia and one-party rule. And the way that they had that beautiful skyline so quickly is because they didn't have a lot of stakeholder input. They had a lot of corruption, and they had autocratic vision. And then but it actually ended up, in the long run, being a very nice city. Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Malaysia was the month that I became a Vegebrity, a vegan celebrity. I gave 5 different lectures around the country, but they even flew me to Kathmandu, Nepal. You see that symbol there? That's a Hindu symbol. It looks like a swastika, right? And I put that there just because it's interesting that different things mean different things to people, right? And that's actually a very holy and religious symbol in Buddhism. And so I gave my keynote address in Kathmandu, Nepal, and we had a farewell event with a lot of people, and they were eating, they were singing, they were dancing literally on the tables, they were giving speeches, all without alcohol. And I thought, at night, and eating like there was no tomorrow, and having just a ball. And I thought to myself, gosh, I don't remember going to a social event like this without alcohol since I was in high school. And the Nepal, people from Nepal and India and Malaysia generally do not drink alcohol. I thought that was an interesting thing. And for that month, I actually did not drink wine, which people ask me, you're a vegan, but do you drink wine? I say, well, I'm a vegan, not a saint. So everything was fine. We had a great farewell. I'm on the airplane. I'm sitting down. I'm strapped in. And the airplane is about to turn the curve so we can hit the jets on the straightaway. And nothing prepared me for what happened next. There was an explosion. I thought it was one of our engines. But it was actually a plane crash, a crash landing that we just missed. It was a 70 passenger commuter plane. 38 people perished. We were on the runway for several hours. We were not allowed to move. And so I had maybe a half a bar of cell phone service to 1 bar. It kept going back and forth to nothing to 1. But I was able to make a call, and I called my parents. I said, Mom and Dad, I'm okay. But there's been a plane crash, and we're stuck here for a while, and I'm not sure if I'm going to get out tonight back to Malaysia, my home back in Malaysia. Whenever I went on a side trip, I always felt like coming back to where I was living that month was like home. So even though I lived in 10 countries, 12 cities, 10 countries, I actually visited 16 countries in total. And so when I told them about that, my mom put me on speaker, and my dad and my mom traded barbs. They said, "You need to come home. You need to stop this travel. You've been away for too long. There's nothing left to do. Just come home." I called my sister Jeannie. Told her, I said, "I've been okay. There's been a crash." She said, "You need to come home now. You need to stop this travel thing. This is just getting too far, too much." So as it turned out, I was the one who ended up consoling them instead of the other way around. So now we're going to South America and North America. We're done with Europe. We're done with Asia. And it was like hitting a brick wall. Culturally, all of the order, all of the respect, all of the non-confrontationalness, if that's a word, all of that went out the window with the Argentinian people. But I want to get into it further because I learned to really love the Argentinian people. Uber didn't work well. It was illegal, so it showed up, but it didn't work. So I had to call a taxi. So I get a taxi to go to a new grocery store. I'm still trying to figure out the city. And he says, somehow we got onto, I told him I was from Japan, coming from Japan. He volunteered. He said, our people, he says, we're from Spain and Italy, and we got all of the bad and none of the good from them. I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah, as a matter of fact," he says, "how does an Argentinian commit suicide?" I said, "How does he do that?" He says, "He climbs to the top of his ego and he jumps off." There was a tenseness in the air because of severe, the places, to this day, you can just track the inflation rate. It's an economic basket case. And just the 2 months that we were there, the inflation was 24%. So walking from the apartment to the workspace, it's about an 18-minute walk in that city, if I recall. You'd see in the tiendas and the mercados, the stores, the price of apples would change from one day to the next. Just incredible. So the bonfire that you see there on the left is actually something that I snapped myself. It was like a herd of buffalo. I was leaving lunch one day to go back to the workspace, like a herd of buffalo rushing past me, almost knocking me over, and they're all wearing a uniform. I realized, I found out that the uniform was they were in the electrical union, and they were marching to the headquarters, which is about 2 blocks past the bonfire, but they stopped at the intersection to light the bonfire, and it got me thinking, wow, okay, so I guess I can understand how would we feel if just after 2 months our paychecks were worth that much less, right? They have severe problems. And I go into that in the book. If you're into policy, if you're into little history, I throw a little bit of all of that in there. So outside of Buenos Aires, we made a solar panel for a hot water heater for a house because they did not have hot water. So we built the solar panel out of beer cans and Coke bottles. And this was no experimental design. The organization that helped us out to put it together had done this many times, and this design actually can last for years. So how do you make a solar panel for a hot water heater? You take a beer can, you flatten the beer can, you paint the beer can black, you put it on a paint stirrer, then you stick all of that inside a 1-liter Coke bottle that you cut in half, plastic Coke bottle. Then you put all of that inside the 2-liter Coke bottle, and then you stick those together with saran wrap, large saran wrap, and then you put all of those onto PVC pipe to make the cells. And then when it's done, and I'm from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where the Amish people live, and they have their farms, and they can build you a barn in about 1.5 or 2 days. It's called a barn raising. Have you heard of a barn raising? So with this solar panel, we got it onto the roof, and we hoisted it up like a barn raising. We stuck the water in the one end, and out the other end shot the water, and the family was so happy. And so, again, I'm in this room, I've been in this room so many times, wearing a tuxedo, writing a check, giving air kisses, and that's good, and we need that, but there was nothing like doing. The kissing culture. Here's how here's how I learned to love Argentina. I never seen anything like it. If you go to the grocery store and the new shift comes in, you go to an office and the people come to work, or wherever you are, but for work especially, they'll go around for the first half an hour kissing each other. That's all they do. It's like, and I was looking at this, I'm thinking to myself, gosh, if this happened in the United States, there'd be 20 lawsuits by lunchtime for sexual harassment. And you know what it does? It reveals the sweetness of the people. So here, you see, I actually broke my foot just from a stress fracture, just from walking so much. I estimate I walked about 5 miles a day, so, conservatively, it's over 1,500 miles through the year. And so I had my boot cast, which I was not happy about. Actually, when you read the book, you'll see that overall, my mood by now is bad. I was tired. My body hurt. I missed home. I missed the creature comforts of home. I had a broken foot. And then but I did have a nice therapist who, on the first day, greeted me with a kiss, said goodbye to me with a kiss. And so even though the exact quote I have in my book is that Argentina and I didn't get along the whole time. Even though we didn't get along the whole time, the Argentinian people kissed their way into my heart. Lima, Peru. We're getting close to the full completion. We're getting there. Lima, Peru. It's a first world, first class city. It sits on a cliff, Lima. It's actually, I think it has the most Michelin star-rated restaurants in all of South America. Although you see the pictures here out in the countryside, and you see that the countryside's very beautiful as well. It's a mix of Europeans and the indigenous Western Hemisphere Indians. So if you get outside of the city, you'll see the lady on the left. They look like that, and they're about 4 feet tall, and they love to wear bright colors, and they're wonderful, wonderful people. And so an interesting thing happened. I write about it extensively, and I'll just touch on it here. I participated in this hut you see in the middle in a sacred plant ceremony where we were given a tea, and for 5 hours we were in a trance. And it was not recreational. It's considered very effective for ailments like PTSD, people with emotional problems, people who need to forgive themselves or forgive others. And I write about it extensively, just how positive and meaningful it was for me. And at that point, my foot was healing and I started to feel positive again. So now we're going on to Colombia, both Medellin and Bogota. Bogota is the capital of Colombia, and it sits 8,300 feet above sea level, and which means it's cold. I never considered that where you lived in relation to sea level actually governed the weather. It was also very hard to breathe, so it wasn't my favorite place. But Medellin, on the other hand, where we also spent a month, is called the City of Eternal Spring. And it's the City of Eternal Spring because it sits at 5,000 feet, which is about 1,000 feet below where you start to maybe have some breathing challenges. But best of all, at 5,000 feet, every day is springtime. Every day is springtime. And I call it the Medellin miracle because we know about Medellin from shows like Narcos and the narco traffickers, and namely Pablo Escobar. And guess what? All of that pretty much went away. I went on a Pablo Escobar tour with a man that I became friends with because he had the local coffee shop next to the workspace. Federico is his name. And he actually grew up with Pablo Escobar's one of the sons. And he said one story that they were on the soccer team. Pablo Escobar's son and him were on the soccer team. And the bodyguards traveled with them wherever they went with the soccer team. And they never lost. Because no one ever challenged this team. They never even went near Pablo Escobar's son. And that little unassuming structure there, that house, is where Pablo Escobar fell to his death after being shot. And that is Pablo Escobar's house, which looks more like an army barracks. And they actually, by now they must have knocked it down. They're planning on knocking it down and making a public park out of it. But in the basement they found torturing equipment and different things like that. And I presume that that was all in a day's work, and he would go upstairs and maybe help his children with homework. That was the kind of guy that he was. So now we are in month 12. We are in Ciudad de Mexico, and you can see the picture of the Mangata group, the Tramily. We went from 49 people, now we're down to about 30 people, which is understandable. Life gets in the way. Some people lost their jobs, some people got homesick, some people missed their girlfriend or boyfriend, some people just didn't like it anymore. But many of us stuck together. Actually, the 5 or 6 people who literally became my brothers and a sister, we had a deal with ourselves before we even set foot in Split that no matter what, we were going to make it through month 12. And I think that's probably why we became friends. We just had that drive and that value between us. Huge city, Ciudad de Mexico, 20 million people, but it was built on a lake. So as the city grew, they had to fill it in with clay. And they're also on 2 tectonic plates, so they have 20 earthquakes a day. So you're literally walking down the street and you see one building's leaning this way, one building's leaning that way, and you're thinking, my gosh, is that ever going to fall? But in this 12 month, we did a lot of partying, and not partying, but I celebrated my birthday there with the guys, and we did a lot of lunches. As many of people liked eating vegan, and I would have them over for a party. We'd have these long lunches. And I remember we were saying to ourselves, guys, just savor this moment. This is never going to be like this again. This is never going to happen like this again. And so the breakthrough, because I heard it so many times, is such a cliche. Being in the moment and all that stuff, being in the moment. But I really was in the moment. And when you think about it, the mind is very discursive. There's a little puppy dog that runs around in our mind. And so we're always thinking, oh, this person didn't call me back. Oh, I have to call that person. Oh, I forgot to do that. I don't like what they said to me. What am I going to do for lunch today? Where am I going to go for spring break? On and on and on. We're always thinking. And so the problem with that is so many people live their entire life and they're not even there. So Mexico City was a great place to adjourn and to say goodbye to some incredible people. And so we had a farewell weekend. I'd forgotten all about it. On the first week in Split, Croatia, we wrote a postcard to ourselves that we were going to read, that we were given to us on the last weekend at farewell weekend. So you see, I wrote my postcard to myself. Dear Phil, how are you? What did you accomplish? Where do you want to return? How is the vegan food? What's your favorite place? Who is your new family? So now what? LOL. Love me. And so we got through the farewell weekend. And I remember during the last week, and one by one, my 2 roommates had left the apartment and went back to their normal lives. And I was there by myself. And at that point, packing to me was just put everything in a big ball and then hope that it zips up. It wasn't any organized thing. Like the first couple months, you're very careful about everything, but no, just put it all in there and move on. And I just remember thinking to myself, I did it. I did it. 12 cities, 12 months, 10 countries visited, 4 continents, 24 vegan presentations, 49 strangers who became Tramily, and countless connections around the world. So now we're going to wrap it up and then do some questions. But I want to close with a few of these ideas. What does it all mean? Well, cultures are diverse despite globalization. I mean, just by being Greek, we understand this. We live in a culture, but the culture also lives in us. So there's a natural tension between the sovereignty of the individual and the group. Everywhere I go, people are nice. I learned that it's about the proverbial journey and not the destination. It wasn't all fun and games. There was broken bones, broken cell phones, broken promises, broken connections, broken mattresses. It will probably take me an entire lifetime to process everything that happened. When I was preparing for this presentation, because I change it from time to time, I just going through the pictures and I'm thinking to myself, wow, I'm just still unpacking and still processing everything that happened. So this lady that you see, she's the world's oldest person. She's now 117, she's from Italy. And they asked her, what's it like to be 117? And you know what she said? She said, it goes by really fast. Goes by really fast. And so whether we're on this earth for a few decades, or if we live our genetic potential, like I said, I hope they'd have me back next year so I can talk about, among other things, our genetic potential by the rule of 6, which says that all living beings can do and should live to 6 times their maturity age. So she's actually living out her and what could be and should be our genetic potential. So whether we're here for a few decades or 12 or 14 decades, it should be celebratory, adventurous, purposeful, and meaningful. And so I wrote this book not to show off and say, look at me and look at all this cool stuff I'm doing, but I wanted to inspire others on their life's journey, that your real life Mangata, your road-like reflection on the water that's made by the moon, is celebratory, adventurous, purposeful, extraordinary. Cape Life, celebratory, adventurous, purposeful, and extraordinary. So then I will conclude with you with a question, and I will give you the answer as well. Do you have a laptop? Now you go travel. Thank you very much.